Just by way of introduction and welcome to everyone, we have apologies from a couple of colleagues, Catherine Driscoll and Michelle Lynch, and hopefully Alex will be able to join us a bit later. We've already had a very interesting and busy morning discussing a patient story, our work on artificial intelligence, our medium-term financial plans, and our important work on our people strategy and how that's developing. I am very conscious of how busy all of the NHS is at the moment, but our teams in particular. So I want to record my thanks to everyone who works in the Trust for all their hard work and commitment day in, day out. And thanks again to all their family and loved ones who support them behind the scenes. A particular shout out to our allied health professionals on their National AHP Day for their essential support and work. This month is also Black History Month, where we rightly celebrate and applaud the enormous contribution the Black colleagues have made to society, the NHS, and our own organisation. Events such as these remind us that we benefit greatly from the vast richness of the different backgrounds, belief, and race of all of our colleagues. We celebrate and nurture inclusiveness in our organisation and are much the better for doing so. It is who we are. Discrimination has no place in our organisation. It's a non-negotiable. Discrimination based on race, sexual orientation, religious belief, or any other characteristic has no place in any civilised society and no place at Worcestershire Acute. If you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, or have no faith, you have every right to expect to be treated with every civility and care. Hate towards other colleagues or towards others more generally has no place in our organisation. We celebrate inclusiveness, we celebrate diversity, and we celebrate civility. This month is also Freedom to Speak Up Month, and I would strongly encourage any colleagues who feel concerned about something to know that we as a board encourage you to speak up. So without further ado, we will get on to the business of the board. Any declarations of interest, please raise a digital hand. Okay, the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of September. If there are any points of accuracy, could you raise a digital hand for me, please? I can't see any digital hands raised, so I'll take those as accurate and sign those in due course. And our minutes arising on page 5, which is to provide a further update in relation to whether stroke incidence is increasing due to an ageing population. That was circulated. Thank you, Joe, or Jules. But Jules, just in terms of whether it is increasing with our ageing population, can you just give a verbal update for us?
Of course, Chair. Yes, was the response from the team. The incidence of stroke is increasing and is likely to continue to do so, recognising the increasing age of the population. So as I'm sure everybody's aware that as that continues, incidence of other, I'm sure, conditions will increase as well, but stroke in particular has seen an increase in line with that population change.
Thanks, Jules. And we both know, and for members of the public, there's an awful lot of work that goes on with Wye Valley in particular and the whole system to try and maximise the effectiveness of our stroke services and rehabilitation services with our partners. I don't see any other matters arising unless colleagues point them out to me. So without further ado, we move on to Stephen's Chief Executive report. Stephen, how are you seeing things?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's a few things that I want to draw out, and in terms of that, we're coming to a really crucial period of second half of the year. So what we're doing in conjunction with NHS England ICB is doing a review of where we're at, what's the forward look, how confident are we around our plans, both performance and finance. I've mentioned in the report about the oversight framework and segmentation, and I think there'll be a golden thread as we go through the board around two key things really. One is the financial aspects that we are looking at and the work that we've really got to do to keep on our financial numbers, which is really important this year. The second, probably from a performance, but I say performance, but it really is a quality and patient experience lens as well, which is the biggest thing as we go towards winter, is around our UEC and our unplanned care pathways. And from the oversight framework and from what you'll see in the IPR, you can see the disproportionate effect of those pathways and the improvements that we need to make quite quickly to those, and we're all very focused on that. Leading into that, we've been doing a lot of work. Chris has been leading a lot of work with NHSE and ICB colleagues around our winter preparedness. So we're continually going through that. Even though we may have come out of the formal reviews, we continue to do that ourselves. I think that's good practice. And Jules, Haley, Chris, leading work with our clinical teams to work through what other things we can do as we go through that. It'd be remiss not to say to members of the public that may be watching, or any of our staff, it's vital that people get their vaccination and that we have really good vaccination levels in the population and in our staff groups. Learning from Australia that we do really closely seems to say that it can affect it can lessen the effect of flu. So I think that's really, really important. And I think it's fair to say we've changed the model, so we're doing it differently this year, learning. So I'm keeping a personal interest in the vaccination level within the trust. I've mentioned the medium-term planning framework. We have talked about that before, and I know that at board development you've done work around the strategy, where we're at with that medium-term financial plan. So again, that's a really important piece of work for us, because we really want to make sure we're in the best place to take the opportunities that the neighbourhood health models and those changes in the national picture could present to us if we're in the best place possible. And then, as always, we like to pull out some of the work that our brilliant teams are doing despite all the pressures, and sometimes we focus a bit on where it's not right. So I just wanted to pull out, there was a big leadership conference looking at a lot of our apprentices and the work that we've done there, which I think is testimony to the work that Ali's team leads, but also the engagement that we've got within a lot of our managers and leaders in the trust. A big shout to our what we call SAS doctors. They're not military ones flying around the hospital doing extreme things, but instead our specialty associate specialists and specialist doctors who quite often go under the radar but are a really vital part of our workforce, and there was a special week around them that I just want to celebrate everything that they do and contribute to the trust. And then finally, it's a bit of a theme, isn't it, when I do these, that Kidderminster and the services there keep knocking it out the park. So we've got Ward 1 that was the first to receive the outstanding exemplary is an Our Care Excellence Award process. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen, for that sort of overview. And I think in terms of our medium-term financial plan, Neil pointed us towards the essential delivery of 4% CPIP every year, year in, year out, in which case we will get to break even in about 3.5 years. Questions and perspective on Stephen's overview before we move into the integrated performance report? What's worrying you most, Stephen?
I think it's those two things really. There's the scale of the financial challenge this year, although I actually think I think this year is the focus, but actually looking forward, I think we can, if we can get through this year, we'll be in much better shape for next year's and the years after. I can see a path through that, but there are some big numbers that we've got to deliver, and I don't underestimate that challenge. And then I think you'd have to, and I was at HOSC on, I was at the Overview Scrutiny Committee on Friday, and we were talking about winter preparedness. And again, there's a history that the trust has suffered at those points, and I think that's the other bit, is we've got to make sure that we keep delivering the improvements for colleagues, but most importantly patients. I think it's the thing that affects the patient experience the most. So they were the two bits that I would draw out, Chair.
Okay, that's great, Steve. Just pursuing that first point in terms of this year's delivery, one of the key things we took as a burden on behalf of the system was the reduction in the improved effectiveness of our use of community beds with our partners at Hereford and Worcester Partnership Trust. There was about a £6 million benefit if together we were able to realise and bring to fruition that work. How anxious are you about that £6 million? Because obviously that's a big number, which we took in good faith on behalf of the system.
Anxious because we still see those pressures. I don't think it's a reflection of the work. I'm saying these comments not as a reflection of the amount of work and quality of work that we are doing with partners. If I was to take it from a direct result of are we moving out of capacity, are we seeing our occupancy drop, then no, we've got a lot further to go. So that's still a significant risk for us. But like I said, I can see some areas as well, though, where it's working really well. So I know that we're on the right lines. So if I take stroke has dropped significantly because our consultants are in there and that length of stay has moved, and we're working really closely on it. But I've still got to say it sits as a high risk.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, we'll move on then to the integrated performance report. And Stephen, you did give a quick overview. What would you care to pull out before we move into the detail?
Yeah, I mean, I probably won't say a lot because I've touched on it in my report particularly around UEC pressures and the finance. And I think the other thing I am aware of is when I do this, I usually steal colleagues' thunder. So I'm quite happy they're my headlines, they're my big things that I think we've really got to get some movement on and some focus, but happy to move it on to those relevant sections and ask questions around there.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So we'll start off with quality and safety. Hayley and Jules, over to you.
I'm terribly sorry. I've just put a note in the chat. There's suddenly some work going on next door. Is that causing a lot of interference for you? Can you hear that? No, not too bad. Okay, good.
None whatsoever.
Okay, please let me know if there is. So in terms of the quality and safety, we have made some pleasing progress this month with our performance against the quality standards for our patients who have sustained a neck and femur fracture. So I'm pleased to report that looks like that is heading in the right direction, and that's thanks to the work that is going on in that team and directorate. So we're very pleased to see that. We are making sure that our sepsis training is reintroduced now with up-to-date national guidance, in line with national guidance, and we're working to integrate those sepsis pathways along with our deteriorating patient pathways and the implementation of Martha's Rule, all which will be linked electronically through the electronic patient record, which should be a step forward for us as an organisation. So that work is continuing, which I'm pleased to be able to report. Along those lines, our electronic prescribing, so medicines prescribing module is due to launch next month, and that, once implemented, will hopefully bring the dividends in terms of our antimicrobial stewardship improvements as well. And we'll be providing prompts for staff to consider changing of antibiotics and the such like to make sure those are up to date and in line with good or best practice. So from my perspective, those are the updates this month, Chair.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jules. And Hayley?
From my perspective, just a couple of things. Number one, IPC. So as colleagues are aware, there's been some real challenge with IPC over the early part of the year. We had an NHSC visit in May that resulted in the organisation being in intense support and monitoring. We had another visit in September, and it was a very, very positive visit. We are still waiting for the formal letter, but the informal feedback is there was real staff engagement and some real improvements were demonstrated. So hopefully we'll be moving from intense monitoring to enhanced. But I am waiting for that letter to come formally. But again, real credit to the teams who have really taken the challenge and made some significant improvements for our patients. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is complaints. We are seeing an improvement in our complaint responses, and I would imagine that will continue moving forward. The quality of the complaints that I am seeing are of a good quality, Chair. So they're just the two things I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Jules. Any questions or perspectives, Hayley or Jules? Karen?
Thanks, Chair. Hayley, I just wanted to pick up on the complaints issue, and
Yeah.
as you say, we are starting to see improvements, and I just wonder if you could remind me the 5-day issue, as in we call all the complainants within 5 days. I mean, that figure still obviously needs some work on it. It's only 56%. Is that does that call happen locally or from the governance teams, or who is supposed to make that call, that first reach out, just so I
My
understand a bit better?
understanding, Karen, is the first call is from the complaints team to validate the concerns and make sure that the issues to be investigated are the correct issues. In all honesty, Karen, I think nothing's more valuable than a member locally calling a complainant, because that absolutely gets that connection. So it's a bit of both. However, initially it is the case manager of that complaint.
Okay, thank you.
And Sue?
Just wanted to acknowledge the work that Jules has led on the necrophema pathway, having been complaining about it for the last 3 years. To my certain recollection, that's the first time we've seen such a huge uptick, and I think we, as a board, we ought to pass our congratulations on to that team. It's been a bit of a mountain, so thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And always nice to get nice feedback, Jules. And finally, Tony, then we'll move on. Tony?
Yeah, thanks. I'd also echo that point on necrophema. Well done. Jules, my question's about sepsis bundle and training on it. It's been a long-standing challenge, hasn't it, for the Trust? Do you think with the changes and improvements that are now coming in and the automation that we may now be turning a corner on it to get better uptake of it, please? Thank you.
Tony, I certainly hope so. The actions that the teams have taken appear to be the right ones. So once those are embedded through the EPR, we'll obviously be monitoring it really closely, Tony. And if it doesn't deliver what it needs to, then we'll review the actions and review compliance and make sure that it does.
Okay, thank you. Okay, team, we'll move on then to the engine room, so to speak. And Chris, thank you for all your commitment and hard work. How are you seeing things from the operational perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just pull out some key bits. I think to echo Stephen's point, the bit that's keeping me awake is definitely the UEC pathways and the challenges we face in terms of the progress that we still need to make there for our patients and also for the teams that are working at the cold face of this work. So from a UEC point of view, we remain in tier 2 escalation with the regional team. We are still seeing sustained high levels of attendances, and that's continued into September as well. And we haven't seen the demonstrable impact on demand management schemes, particularly around those patients that choose to walk in terms of alternatives for them for access. We had seen some really good positive progress around 12 hours in the department, but the latest data for September suggests that's stalled because September has been particularly difficult for the organisation around urgent emergency care. Ambulance handovers within 45 minutes, again, we're doing really well into August, but have been impacted by the challenges in September, which I'll come on to in a minute, because we do remain with a bed occupancy against our core beds consistently over 100%. So we are still caring for patients in unfunded areas, in corridors in our emergency department and in corridors and in temporary escalation spaces in our wards. There's lots of work going on internally because a lot of that is things that we need to control ourselves and within our own gift. So a pilot of navigation at the front door of the emergency department is helping to stream patients to alternative pathways on the hospital sites. We've launched together with the Health and Care Trust what we call Hospital at Home, which is a virtual ward, initially with 9 beds, and that will move up to 30 beds by the end of the calendar year. We're refreshing our board round programme, starting with some tests of change on our AMUs with support from ESIST colleagues as part of the support we've got in place with them as part of being in tiering. And we're also looking at developing a clinical risk framework linked to our operational escalation triggers so that we really understand not only the actions that we take, but then how do we support our clinical teams to make different decisions depending on the level of risk, not only in our organisation, but also in the community in terms of how we overall manage that risk, again, together with partners. I think it's fair to say there's quite a lot more work to do in terms of our thresholds for what that looks like in terms of when we make decisions, the decisions that we make internally, and how partner organisations react to the situation on the ground. But I think it's fair to say, from my point of view, we're seeing more positive progress in the last 2 or 3 weeks in that direction than we have done previously. But until we can really drive down the occupancy, I think we are going to continually face challenge. I'm really focused personally on 12 hours in department because I think that's a really good measure of flow across the organisation and the system. But there are specific actions that the teams are taking in terms of improving performance in their own areas of control. From a cancer point of view, again, continuing to see high levels of demand. On one aspect, that's a great thing that we're seeing more people come forward with earlier stage where they've got more concerns and we can diagnose more cancers earlier. But clearly has an impact on our capacity in terms of how we're able to deal with that. We remain in tier 2 for cancer performance, and whilst we're not yet back on track for the cancer standards that will get us out of tiering, we've seen positive progress around faster diagnosis standards, and the latest data has us over 77% against the national standard of 80, but also broadly in line with what we said we would do. And it was the not doing what we said we would do around faster diagnosis standard and 62 days that put us back into tiering for cancer in the first place. So I'm really pleased with the efforts of teams in that regard. 62 days will take us a little bit longer. We're looking towards the end of the calendar year in terms of recovery, and there's likely to be a deterioration, particularly in skin, while we clear a backlog of patients or backlog of treatments that patients require who are on a skin cancer pathway, most of whom will statistically not turn out to have cancer, but we do need to recognise that may have a slight deterioration in the short term. I'm most concerned about cancer around just the level of activity that's required to deliver what we need to do, but externally the lack of a commissioning solution for gynae-oncology patients with gynecological cancer requiring surgery, because we're not commissioned to provide a lot of that activity, and at the moment there is not a resolution to what has now become a long-standing, for a number of months, plan from the specialist commissioners at NHS England. But massive thanks to West Midlands Cancer Alliance for the funding we've been awarded that is going into supporting oncology and increasing our MRI capacity, so we'll be able to make diagnoses quicker. And then lastly, around elective, we are broadly on track with where we said we would be around elective. There are still a small number of patients over 65 weeks. We'll be clearing those by the end of November. The majority of those now sit in gastroenterology. The short-term solution to that has been insourcing. The longer-term solutions, we've approved the additional consultant recruitment. For 52 weeks, we are a little bit adrift as a percentage. The overall target is to be less than 1% by the end of the year. We said we'd be at 1.45% of our total waiting list at this point, and we're at 1.57. And for those treated under 18 weeks, we are online. We were at 58.5%, and we're at, which is on track with where we said we would be. That said, we need to do better for our patients. So there are specialty improvement plans for each of the specialties. Those are the responsibility of director, managers and clinical directors to develop and deliver. We're making the most of those plans through the GIRFT opportunities. Particular focus at the moment, supports productivity, is about how we can use the latest information from GIRFT about clinic template standardisation. Done some work also looking across the group, how some of that has played out as part of previous foundation group boards, and we're using some of that information to drive towards improving that. And we are looking to wind down our theatre improvement programme for the remainder of the year, not because it's not the right thing to do, but a lot of what that programme is delivering is now business as usual, and using that programme resource differently into the future to focus on outpatients, because we know we need to get the front end of the pathway right, see more patients more quickly in whichever way makes sense for them, so that we can see the real benefits in terms of giving them earlier access. That is not to take away from the work we need to do around increasing cases per list that we're really focused on as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Just a couple from me, given that we are flashing red nationally on our A&E performance again, so we really do need to turn that around as quickly as possible. And just in terms of the gynae cancer patients, I always go for the easy summaries. Clearly, that will be extremely worrying if you're a woman, even if you're getting the diagnosis, not being able to get the necessary intervention. How quickly do we, you said it's been a number of months, we've been waiting for specialist commissioning to resolve that. For members of the public, that's obviously outside our control. But when would you hope that it would be sorted out by others, Chris?
So just to reassure members of the public, the solution here is that we don't have a long-term solution. So individual patients, our clinical teams are talking to neighbouring organisations' clinical teams. So on a patient-by-patient basis, we're managing patients in that way so that patients are still able to access the care they need. So I wouldn't want people to be overly concerned about the long-term solution. Around the long-term solution, though, Chair, at the moment, I don't have a timeline. I think that's the bit that's worrying me the most. We've got another meeting planned for November in terms of meeting with specialist commissioners about what that long-term solution might look like, since there is a lack of capacity with the provider where they're currently commissioned to go.
Okay, if you could at that meeting say that we as a board are worried on behalf of our citizens for the long term. Simon?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris. Just on winter plans and preparedness, I noted in the report there was a regional assurance event that took place, and a number of areas were noted for strengthening and improving further. Could you just give us an idea of what those areas are and sort of your confidence that they will be strengthened and help us as we go through winter?
Certainly, Simon. So the regional sort of assurance event stress test brought together all integrated care boards and trusts in the region face to face, just to remember the public to understand the context of that. I think it's fair to say there are a number of commitments that we made and things that we've taken away as actions. That includes things like the clinical risk framework that I referred to earlier in terms of having that in place. The other bit was about, as a system, how we can be more proactive. So we are very good at getting to a stage where we have a situation that we need to react to and reacting to it very quickly. What we're not so good at as a system, and this is all parts of the system, including ourselves, in terms of proactively stopping some of those situations happening. And that's the work on the escalation plan in terms of making that more proactive to prevent things happening in the first place. Is the main bits that we need to focus on. Broadly, the system plan was felt to have all the right ingredients to do what it needs to do, but it's then just making sure it does what it needs to do. So in terms of my confidence, I've got a reasonable level of confidence that we'll be able to get our internal triggers in terms of the escalation actions to a place where we can be more proactive, and the way we're doing our daily rhythm already is becoming more proactive in terms of managing things. But at the moment, less assured about how we're going to do that as a system, not because not because I haven't got the assurance, but more because we haven't had a chance to get that assurance yet. More conversations and meetings to take place over the next week or two in that regard.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm conscious of time now. Colin? On mute, Colin.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, Chris, against the heading hospital zone late discharges, you highlight a risk of transport capacity. Wondered if you could unpick that a little bit for me.
Yeah, so for patients who are eligible for hospital transport or non-emergency patient transport services leaving hospital, there is a contract that is held by the local integrated care board, or the ICB. That has a level of capacity available, depending on the number of discharges that require access to that and the time at which they require access. That can be a limiting factor in terms of patients being able to leave hospital. So we have had occasions where we have been able to say a patient's fit to go. We've known where they needed to go, and we haven't been able to get them home because there hasn't been any transport to do so. And this isn't, we're not talking taxis and things like that. It's, you know, specialist transport requiring stretcher transfer or healthcare professionals to travel with them. So it is a real risk to us, particularly because we run at such a high occupancy level. Conversations ongoing with the ICB, and we have also used on occasion a third-party transport provider to supplement that, but that comes at a cost to the system and to the public.
Yeah, Chris, taxi services generally are starting to drive me a bit crazy. I am aware of just the enormous profit margins taxi services, which take an agency nurse and basically pop an agency nurse to take people home in a taxi with a nurse, making an absolute fortune. In today's paper over lunch, there's been the stated results of a Send-related taxi firm, 24/7 Group, whose turnover, just one company, is over £95 million. This issue of taxi services isn't for you, Chris, but Neil, it is for you. I really do want to start to get behind how much we are, as a system, are spending on taxis. It is a waste of taxpayers' money, and it should be putting into the provision of healthcare in the community, in GPs and in our acutes, not allowing super profits to be made by taxi companies. So Neil, if you can take that forward, and can we make sure that's an action point? Team, we do need to move on because we're now running late. Ali, over to you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things to pull out from my report. There generally are some positive indicators around workforce stability. So we have more starters than leavers, we have low vacancy, we have low turnover. So that combined gives us a good picture that we are attracting people that we want to into vacancies, and we're keeping the people that we've got. So positive indicators of experience. It does, however, create a bit of a challenge because we can't continue to grow our workforce. We can't afford to continue to grow our workforce. We need to become more efficient with the utilisation of the resources that we've got. And in practice, what that means is that we have a really focused scrutiny as we go to recruit to vacancies, particularly those in non-clinical and corporate areas, to really question whether we need to replace vacancies like for like, whether we can do things differently, or whether we can use other technologies to work more efficiently and effectively as well. So that remains an area of focus for us to really make sure that we are resourcing as efficiently and as effectively as we can do. The two areas really that keep me awake at night from a workforce perspective, firstly are around temporary staffing. Now, we've seen great progress in the reduction on agency. So around this time last year, we were spending about 8.5% of our pay bill on agency staff. We've now reduced that down to around 4.5% of the pay bill, which is a much better position, and we've stated a number of times in this forum how we want to make sure our patients are cared for by staff that we recruit ourselves, colleagues that we've trained in our ways of doing things and that are part of our team. What we have seen, however, though, is as the agency usage and reliance has reduced, we've increased on the bank dependency for bank colleagues that we work with. Now, in one sense, around 80% of our bank workers, if I take nursing and midwifery, are our own colleagues that are doing additional work. So from a patient experience perspective, that's a more positive place to be. However, we also don't want to overburden our colleagues working too many additional hours. We know there'll be a number of people relying on those additional hours, but that's not an ideal situation as we continue, and we are using temporary staffing levels way above our levels of vacancy. So this isn't a simple swap out of an agency or bank member of staff for a permanent member of staff. We know that some of that is around making sure that we provide safe care when we have additional demand on our services and we have overcrowded areas or departments. But we also know that some of that will also be supporting gaps because of sickness as well of our colleagues. So that remains a real area of focus. NHS England are giving us some additional support that starts this month to really help work with us and help give us another set of eyes on where we might be able to improve that situation. And we are also scrutinising on an ongoing basis the rates that we pay for temporary work as well, particularly driving down those rates with our agency partners as well to make sure we're not paying above the odds for that additional support. From a sickness perspective, sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I thought you'd stopped.
Almost. My last point was really from a sickness perspective. This is the other area that keeps me awake at night, is just making sure that we keep our colleagues well. That's particularly important at this time of year as we start to approach the colder months, the winter months, where we know that people will become extra busy, but also that their health may deteriorate as well. There are lots of initiatives that we have within the organisation to try and keep people well proactively. But one of the things we will be doing is just stepping up some of that management and support as we approach the next few months, and really driving home the vaccination message with our colleagues as well, particularly around this year's flu campaign, and trying to make sure that people get ahead of this now, and protect themselves as best they can as we approach the winter months. I'll pause there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions and perspectives to Ali? Just a couple from me. Stephen and Ali, can we, the slide, the bar chart on page 22 of 112, which relates to what you were talking about, Ali, this difference between vacancy rate and use of agency. Can we do more of a deep dive into what's happening there? Because I don't quite understand that, even if it's just a sort of education bit for us, because I would expect for the vacancies us to match that with the use of agency, and it doesn't appear always to be as synchronized as that. The second thing is I really do worry about our sickness rates at Worcestershire. They are substantially ahead of Y. If we were able to get the Worcestershire sickness rates down to the Wye Valley sickness rates, we'd be saving well over £1 million. So, Ali, I know you're talking to Jeffrey down there about the new protocols they put into place, but if we can do so. If we can keep the pace going, that would be great. Hayley?
Yeah, just a quick one about the banking agency. Obviously working with Ali to look at what we can do from a nursing midwifery HP perspective, but part of the additional shifts being utilised are due to extra capacity, and I think we just need to capture that, don't we, Ali, in the report, because we know that we've got extra areas that aren't funded for funded establishment, therefore bank and agency are being used. But we'll try and capture that better, couldn't we, Ali, moving forward?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. And Karen, your hand went up and then went down, I think.
I've put it in the chat to save time, Chair. That's
really kind. Thank you very much. So we move on then to the money, and we're now, I think, 5 months in. Neil, how are you feeling about the money?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So yeah, month 5, we're still able to report break-even position year to date, but as Stephen mentioned in his Chief Exec's report, it is becoming increasingly more challenging given the increased size of the CPIP in the back half of the year. So just looking at month 5, can refer the board to page 26 on the report. There's a nice little graphic there which underlines where we are year to date. So there's lots of pressure. The red bars offset by some non-recurrent savings that we're able to chip in. So we've got an underlying run rate challenge of around £1 million a month at this stage that we're largely mitigating from the balance sheet on a month-on-month basis, and the balance sheet is not sufficiently resourced to continue that to the end of the financial year, certainly. So we do need the CPIPs to start to begin to mature and bring some fruit back into the position. So in terms of the key challenges, CPIP, the excess costs of supporting flow on a regular basis. We've had some one-off in terms of industrial action, but as you can see there, they're offset by the balance sheet. In terms of the back end of the year, and I guess the thing that's keeping me awake is the size of the CPIP risk.
Neil, we've lost you. You've gone on to mute. You said the size of the CPIP risk, and then you went on to mute.
Apologies. The size of the CPIP risk in the back half of the year, Chair, you can see on slide 28. You can see there's a big step from September into October. So from month 7 onwards, we need to be generating 3.5 to 4 million more savings a month than we have been in the first 6 months of the year, which presents us with a significant challenge. If you look at the bar to the right of that graphic that shows the maturity of our schemes. We've still got 22 million in Amber and Med, so pre-pipeline and opportunity. So from that perspective, we are running against time to catch up. So we've put in place some mitigation plans, working with the divisions and corporate functions around what other areas of opportunity to save funds going forward there are. So we've worked closely with them. We have got some mitigation plans, but they aren't yet sufficient to cover that gap to the end of the financial year. So we need to continue to work on the maturity of our CPIP plans, and indeed productivity needs to come into the fore in terms of that opportunity at individual specialty level to bridge some of that gap. We know that the opportunity still exists, so we've really got to be focused on bringing that into play between now and the end of the financial year. Cost controls are in place at this point as well. In terms of cash, clearly we know that our deficit support funding is linked to the forecast that we've got and the credibility of our plans. So we're working those mitigation plans up to share with the regional office to get some traction and cover around the cash. If we continue as we are, we will run out of cash in around December time. So we do need to progress with those plans swiftly. Clearly, we'll be taking those to the Financial Recovery Board at the end of this month for oversight and assurance, but that's where we are at this point, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neil. I'm conscious of time now, guys. We're running over 10 minutes late. Any questions or perspectives to Neil? Again, just for members of the public, we need to, year in, year out, compound, deliver 4% total cost and productivity improvement over the next 3.5 years to get to break even, and that's what we're focused on. Thanks, Neil, for your hard work. We'll move on then to the safe staffing report, both midwifery and nursing, and if we can try and catch some time up, that would be wonderful. But Justine, lovely to see you. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So safe staffing report for August. Happy to report that all shifts were safe in August. However, it was a busy month and we remain in a sustained peak from May. You'll see there in the KPIs, really pleased to report that the sickness for our support staff is now below the trust target. I think that's probably the first time in the last 5 years. So that's huge hats off to the team and also the HR support that we've had to manage that. It really has come to fruition now and hopefully will be maintained. You'll see also within that group the vacancies are still a bit higher than we would like. They are. There is a pipeline and we will hopefully complete all of those vacancies by the end of the year. New in the report for this 6 months is the Birth Rate Plus desktop, because as you know, our Birth Rate Plus audit is slightly delayed. I do now have the final report, but from a desktop perspective, you'll see there that we are currently funded for the requirement, but the detail obviously of the full Birth Rate Plus report will be shared with board next month. And I wasn't going to say anything else more today. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Justine. Questions or perspectives to Justine? Okay, Justine, and thank you for the work you're doing across White Valley as well. It's important to make sure all babies being born in Hereford and Worcestershire are safe and as safe as they can be. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to bring life into the world. We just need to make sure we do so safely. Thank you for your hard work. Hayley, over to you for the nursing side.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be very quick. So it's a really comprehensive report. So just a few things to pull out. Our fill rates and our care hours per patient per day are all within national range and guidance, which is positive, but you will see the detail in the report. We are still seeing improvements with RN vacancies, and we have secured our student nurse cohort vacancies and moving forward in the next 2 cohorts, which is really positive. And we do have some real clear pipelines with nursing associates and that top-up programme to RN. We are focusing on, as Ali said, the bank reductions, and a lot of that is down to the additional capacity. So again, working alongside colleagues in terms of how can we shut that additional capacity. Well, I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you,
you.
Hayley. Any questions or perspectives to Hayley? Hayley, it's your second month with us. Have we frightened you off yet? Are you enjoying it?
Not at all. I'm delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you. Really pleased to have you on board. Okay, team, we'll move on then to the board committee reports. And first is Equality Governance Committee from August. Julie, anything you'd particularly like to pull out?
I don't think so. All the relevant issues have come through to board anyway, so I'll leave the minutes as they stand.
Thank you, Julie. Any questions or perspectives to Julie? In a similar vein, the Audit and Assurance Committee. Colin, anything you'd like to pull out?
Just two things quickly, Chair. One is to highlight that we had a report by the internal auditors on safeguarding, and while we can never be complacent in such an important area, it's good to have an independent assessment of the quality of our governance arrangements, and it was a significant assurance. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is that we received a report on our own internal assessment of our emergency preparedness, resilience and response care standards. And out of 62 standards, our self-assessment said that we are compliant in 59, and in the 3 remaining ones were partially compliant. So again, that was a good report that we've got the right controls in place. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Any questions or perspectives to Colin? Okay, so we'll move on then. Thanks to Colin. The People and Culture Committee. Karen, over to you.
You're on mute, Karen.
Apologies. You've got the note. I'm just trying to find the right page in the paper. You've got the notes from the meeting that was held in August. Obviously, it's been some time since then, but we did have a meeting last week on the 7th of October. I'm happy to take any questions from the August meeting. Last week's meeting, we had a really helpful update from the Women's Network. I know Ali touched on that earlier on, but that network is really making some great progress and developing very well. We also received a new report to the committee, which was on ER casework, which is really helping us understand where we are with both the number of and the amount of casework coming through, the, I guess, national increase in terms of the litigious world that we seem to live in, and picks up some of the points that we discussed earlier on today about how we ensure that we're tackling the right things and passing on the right messages and actions across the organisation. We also received assurance from our Chief Medical Officer, both on the resident doctors plan, responsible officers report, and we also heard about job planning, which I think everybody around the gallery and elsewhere will know has been on our minds and will continue to be monitored, but we are definitely seeing some progress in that area. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions or perspectives to Karen? Can we just make sure we thank, she's not with us today, Mel, who is our Freedom to Speak Up guardian on this Freedom to Speak Up month, for all her hard work. And again, like I said in my introduction, I really do strongly encourage colleagues to speak up and call out things that they're concerned about. We are here to support you. We'll move on then to the Responsible Officer report. Jules.
Thank you, Chair. So this report highlights the activity that's taken place over the last 12 months in the responsible officer space, and the purpose is to show the organisation's compliance with the medical profession regulations of 2010. This report will go from this point up to the higher responsible officers network to provide assurance of our activity in this space to the higher level responsible officer. Happy to take any questions, Chair, because there's quite a lot of information in there.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jules. Any questions or perspectives on this? Absolutely key. Are we all happy to it's just for information at this stage, isn't it, Jules? It's not for approval. Okay. Can't see any hands raised, so we'll move on then to.
Sorry, Chair, no, for approval in order to go up to the high level RO.
Okay, that's what I thought, confused me on the agenda. So if you're not happy to approve, can you please raise a digital hand for me, please? Duly approved, Jules, thank you. And then we move on to the patient and public forum report. We're blessed to have such a engaged patient forum at Worcestershire. Hayley, do you want to introduce this and then between you and Rosemary?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I went to my first PPF in September and it was really well attended and some really good conversations and some great work ongoing. I won't steal Rosemary's thunder because she absolutely chairs this forum brilliantly. So I'm going to hand over to Rosemary to talk about the activity over the last quarter. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you very much, Hayley, and thank you, Chair. And thank you all for inviting me to give a report of our last 6 months. We're particularly pleased that when you actually write a report, you suddenly realise what you've actually been doing. At the time, it doesn't seem so much, but I was very pleased to see that we had achieved a lot. In this time, in this last 6 months, we've increased our number of members to 17, and we've also increased our diversity. So I feel now we are much more representative of our population. At our last meeting, we invited 2 members from the voluntary sector. One was Age UK and the other was Health Watch. We're going to, every alternate meeting, we're going to have some representation from the voluntary sector so we can understand more the concerns of our population. And it was a start, and we're learning how to work together. So that's something going forward. I wanted to pull out a few things in my report. In my first report, I mentioned that sometimes we get frustrated because the response from the Trust is not as quick as we would like. I'm happy to say that this is improving, and in particular, as Hayley will know, at our last meeting, we were really pleased to have Matthew Harland come to tell us about how we're improving access to subject access requests, SAR. This is freedom of information when people want to get their clinical history. One of our members had tried to do this, and it was a very long-winded process, filling in a very detailed form. And then to her horror, when it came back, it didn't include her radiology. And she then discovered she had to do the same form again, practically exactly the same with all the detail. And so we thought, for any person trying to get this was a very difficult situation for people. So we asked the Trust, what can you do about it? And to our really surprise, we got a very quick response. And now the patient, when they fill in the first bit, they're then asked, do they want to do the radiology? They just have to tick a box. And so it's making it much smoother for all our patients. So we're delighted that the Trust responded so quickly to that. So thank you. The other thing we talked about last time was the stroke pathway, which we've been quite concerned about. And we had Julian Burnett and Stuart Guy came to speak to us at our last meeting. We're very pleased that things are very much improving. We were particularly concerned with the care of our patients when they went to the rehabilitation ward at Evesham. And now I gather there are 2 consultants overseeing that. And certainly we've had feedback back from staff at that facility saying how much they appreciate the consultants' oversight. But we're still a bit concerned about out of hours care for those patients there. I appreciate it's the Hereford and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust who are responsible for those beds, but I hope the Trust working with them will help to improve that situation. And then I wanted to move on to two things about outpatients that we are concerned about. You probably heard, and particularly Chris has heard, that we're very concerned about outpatient cancellations. The trust seems to concentrate a lot on DNAs, but the outpatient cancellations, that's the cancellations cancelled by the trust, are many, many times more than the DNAs. So one of our members has been keeping an eye on this, and it is, last month it was slightly improving, but there's still a long way to go. Because it really does affect, it doesn't only affect the patient who is cancelled, it often affects the family as well, because some people have taken time off work and come a long distance. So it's something that we would really like the trust to concentrate on. Going on about outpatients, the appointment letters we've also been concerned about. Several of our members brought some of the letters that they'd had, and there was so much disparity, and yet we're supposed to say there's supposed to be only one template, and one even referred to the COVID regulations. So we really feel there needs to be a focus on getting the template right. But we are aware, and we're really pleased about the fact that that now staff, if they're sending out an appointment to somebody who needs more accessible information, that there's a process in place now that this can happen for the patients who need that extra help. So we're delighted about that. There was a really big bit of work that one of my members did with a tiny bit of help from me, and that was the hearing loop audit. We have a profoundly deaf member, Marilyn Watson, who is so amazing in what she tries to do to improve facilities for the deaf. And she audited every single department in all 3 areas, showing that there was a huge disparity about where we had hearing loops, whether in fact we were there, whether in fact the staff knew they were there, or whether in fact staff knew how to work them. So we put it all together. We're arranging to meet estates to see how we can take this forward. But can I say that the staff were all very welcoming. We went round. They wanted to know how to work them better. They wanted to be able to help our patients. So those were the main things that I wanted to bring to the focus to the board. To thank you all very much for all your support to us over the last 6 months. We're really pleased that how much support we get and how much we're welcomed in the areas we go to. And also to welcome any of you on the board who'd like to come to one of our meetings. We'd be delighted to have you. Thank you very much.
That's great, Rosemary. And the patient forum are lucky to have you as their chair. But hopefully you feel that we as a board never forget we're here to serve our citizens, not to be self-serving. So we really appreciate the feedback, and that sort of summary you gave, I know, is just a small example of the whole variety of different things the patient forum gets involved in. And I know that Sarah Shingler has been a big help to the patient forum over the last year or so, and Hayley, I know, will similarly support you in any way. Any questions or perspectives to Rosemary? Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Rosemary, and thanks, Hayley. I think what really comes through when you step back, not only is the amount of work you do, Rosemary, and the team do, but I think I was really struck when you talked about outpatients, and we'll talk about things like productivity, but actually, if you do that with patient experience, it's the same thing that we're trying to tackle. And I think that's what we need to really get better at talking with colleagues about. We've talked about like UEC. So I think with Hayley, Rosemary, we'll really look to how we can embed that voice in those improvements, because we're talking about the same thing. We just tend to use a kind of more managerial type language. And I think that really comes through your report of let's get those two things tied together.
No, point well made, Stephen. And Simon?
Thanks, Rosemary. Thanks, Hayley, for the report. I note the welcome increase in diversity in the PPF. Are there any areas where you're still looking to recruit to increase that diversity, groups that aren't represented yet? And how do you go about recruiting people and appointing them?
That's quite a difficult one, Simon. I think we need somebody outside to look at us and say, what do we need? It's not so easy when you're actually in a group to identify where your gaps are. But we have got many people with sensory difficulties. We've got people with from different ethnic departments. We've got an age range now from 20 up to the 80s. So we've got a good range of people, but diversity is always welcomed. And I say, if somebody from outside can look at us and say that, it's always been we've tried all sorts of which ways to get diversity. I've gone to various ethnic groups. I've gone to councils, and you just don't get much response at all. So we're hoping that having the voluntary sector joining us, that might well help us to increase our diversity. And at least maybe if we don't increase it, we can get representation from the different groups so we can be able to express that to yourselves.
Okay, thank you. And Hayley, thank you for your thumbs up on that. And finally, Chris, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Chair. I guess for me, Rosemary, I recognise what Stephen said about getting the voice into the outpatient programme particularly, but I guess from my point of view, it'd be really useful if you could identify a member or two who would really help us shape what that programme needs to look like.
Yeah.
So it's an offer in public. It would be really useful if you could identify a member who can really help us shape what that programme looks like from the start, rather than joining as part of the programme.
We would be delighted to do that, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, super team. Thank you, Rosemary. We'll move on now to the provider capability assessment. Stephen, over to you with Gwenny.
Yeah, I will pass this one to Gwenny, who's led us through this process and is far more expertise on it. But again, this just builds into that, just for context, it builds into that increase in new framework that we're all operating in, particularly with the National Oversight Framework. This is another lens of that. So Gwenny, I don't know if you want to step us through.
Yeah, so this is part of the oversight framework, which was introduced quite recently. So we had a short period of time to pull this together. So it's a self-assessment against standards, which linked to the Insightful Board guidance that came out about a year ago. So we've done a full self-assessment that is set out in the first document, and the declaration we've got to submit is in the second document. We have to declare whether we can confirm or partially confirm or not confirm against each criteria. We've assessed as confirmed for all, except in 3 areas we've put partially confirmed. 2 of those relate to the way in which we monitor, measure and analyse health inequalities data, which we think that we could do more on, particularly in relation to collecting the data, because it's difficult to do the analysis without the full data, and also reflecting on the work that we are going to be doing with NHSE around agency reduction, and everything else we've put as confirmed. We've got evidence there that we've got those things in place. NHS England, the regional team, will review this against various other information they know about us, including what they know directly, but also from other organisations, including people like Healthwatch and CQC, and they'll give us a rating, as I've set out there, on a red to green basis, which will help inform how much support that they give us going forward. So that's there for approval. There's a couple of extra things that I've had feedback from some of the execs since this has gone in, so just some not very material, just changes to make, but still seeking approval for that to be submitted today.
Thank you, Gwenny. So this is for approval. Any questions or perspectives from colleagues? Do I sign this off, Gwenny? It's not entirely clear at the bottom of the form, or is it Stephen?
I think it's Stephen, I think, but why
Okay.
I have the managing director do.
Okay, fine. Okay, if you're not happy to approve, can you raise a digital hand for me, please? Okay, super, thank you. So I think we're on to Any other business? Any other business, colleagues? Gwenny or Joe, have we had any questions from members of the public?
Nothing's come through to me, no.
Okay. Just for members of the public and maybe watching this live stream later, please do not hesitate to come forward and ask us any question you would like. We're a public organisation and we're here to serve our citizens. The next meeting is the full board meeting at the beginning of November, on the 5th of November. Would very much encourage members of the public to join us for that. It's a different type of board meeting, but is valuable nonetheless. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing all of you at the December board meeting. Colleagues, I suggest we have a 5-minute break, get back together again at 2:10. Take care, everyone.